Now this is one of my favourite modifications for the Pilates swimming exercise, and it involves the trusty Swiss ball. These things are great. If you haven't used them before, not only do they have the ability to make exercise a lot more difficult, but they do that for a reason that they really increase your awareness about what core stability actually means, and they give you a tool which is very straightforward. If they move when you're on top of them, you know that there's weakness which you're trying to get rid of. So that's really the central core of this swimming exercise. They normally come in 3 dimensions, for those of you who've not used one before: 55 centimetres diameter, 65, and then 75 centimetres. This is a 65 one, and that's probably the most common one. Obviously, it depends upon body size, but for this swimming exercise, the start position is going to be over the top of it. So just kneel in front of the ball, bring yourself on, one hand down, other hand down. And then you want to be in a position where you're probably about the length of your mats. Again, depends on body length, of course, but you want to be relatively neutral in the alignment of your spine. If I was on a 75 centimetre ball, or I was quite small, I'd probably be up in this position like this, which would suggest a different size Swiss ball would be needed. Now once you're on here, we want to be centred, we want to be comfortable, and we're pretty much good to go. We don't want the head stooping down, drawn up, looking down rather than forwards. And with the swimming exercises we would do on the mat, you would just take either an arm, a leg, or both off the floor. Now in the Swiss ball, it's much more difficult. And what you want to do to start with is just see if you're able to take one hand off the floor. And then see if you're able to do the other hand as well. Now what's happened there, I've fallen off. A little bit staged, I concede. But you will find that there is one hand which comes up very easily, and that will almost certainly be the hand which you try first, because your body kind of knows what's coming. And then you'll try to take the other hand off and you'll think, oh, I can't hold that. There's a problem. That's kind of exactly what you want to feel, because everyone will have a strong side for this. Now, if that happens, what we want to try and do is to prevent it, fairly obviously. And you need to be strict with yourself. If you are doing your weaker side and you notice that there's a little sideward shift of the ball, or you notice your head move away from the hand, these are just ways where your body can shift its centre of mass ever so slightly to deal with the deficit of the core strength which is being exposed. When I do this with clients, there can be an absolutely huge discrepancy from side to side in this particular exercise. Don't worry if that's the case. But what we want to do is to, first of all, identify which is the comfortable side, and that will feel like you're doing nothing. And then the other side, there'll be that little correction. And this is where the movement of the ball is really important. If there is any movement in either the ball or the rest of your body, you can't dissociate the movements of the hand lift, and that will signify that you've really found the area you've got to work. So once you've found that, there's no point simply lifting the hand and doing this compensatory pattern each time. Anybody can just bring a hand up and not dissociate the movement. We want to adjust the ratio of the foot width to hand width. So the first port, of course, is to take your feet a couple of inches wider apart, and then you see whether you can perform your hand lift. If you can, great. If not, take them a little bit wider still. If you're kind of getting to mat width for your feet and you're still unable to lift that hand without that little correction, again, don't be disheartened, it's very common, but then you bring the hands together. So you're making this triangular base of support more favourable for the outcome of lifting the hand, getting that dissociation of movement. Now, because you're likely to find that there's a big difference from side to side, it probably lends itself, this swimming exercise, to doing multiple repetitions on one side, so you don't have to keep changing the foot position. But once you've got to a point where you can just about hold on, and you can feel that the ball is about to go, you can feel you're about to lose control, that's probably the optimum width of your feet relative to the width of your hands and that ratio. Because you want to get into that point where your core is just about able to hold with the support of the foot width, and that will get you into that, I kind of call it a purple patch, where you're getting into that point where the neuromotor control for your core stabilizing mechanisms is just able to deal with the challenge being laid out to it, and then that lays the foundation stones for improvement from that point on. So this is why I love this exercise. You can perform just this simple arm lift, and it can be a really good gateway window into your core stability. Now, if you get to a point where you find you're fairly symmetrical in your arm movements, then of course you can move on to the arm and leg addition. Just moving on to essentially that swimming level 3 to the mat work repertoire, and then you can get into some nice control. I would almost advise against that to start with, because what will tend to happen is you can use the weight of the leg to offset some of that core stability deficit. So check first with the arms in essentially that level 2 of the swimming from the mat work program, and really make sure you're controlling that before you move on to the opposite arm and leg addition. So there we have a very simple modification for the swimming with the Swiss ball. There's no hiding place with this one. The number of times I see people and they're just almost in disbelief that they can be that asymmetrical in this particular exercise, and you can kind of see them recognize that the core stability mechanisms which underpin that control being so absent on one side is really something that needs to be addressed. So that's why I love this particular variant, and I hope you enjoy the frustration of it as well. But it's a great way to improve those unilateral deficits which we have. And just in closing, really get into this habit of working out which side is poor, getting to the point where you're just able to control it, and then improving. And gradually, you'll be able to bring those feet closer and closer together until the sides match up, and you'll know that you've established, that kind of symmetrical approach to core stability, which again is why this is such an invaluable tool.